Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Vicki Janowski with the Greater Wilmington Business Journal, and welcome to this week's WilmingtonBiz Talk. We'll get started in just a minute, but first, a quick note from our sponsors, Cape Fear Realtors.
Hello, I'm Ann Gardner, CEO of Cape Fear Realtors. Realtors support this program's efforts to connect our community in meaningful dialogue with actionable insights. Realtors are dedicated professionals who build strong, resilient communities and businesses. Work with someone you can trust. Work with a realtor. Learn more at capefear.realtor.
So thanks everyone for joining us this week on the WilmingtonBiz Talk. This week we are talking about vaccines and the COVID-19 vaccine specifically. Chances are you've either received your first or second dose, or you know someone who has. Maybe you've been texting with folks about what their symptoms and side effects were. Maybe you've had discussions with your friends and family about why you might not want to be getting the vaccine. So lots of questions circulating around, and I know it's been a large topic of discussion, both in our region and also nationally, as the dose supplies have really ramped up. And in North Carolina, eligibility for anyone who wants it over the age of 16 will open on April 7th. So with all that going on, we have joining with us today, Dr. Paul Kamitsuka, who is the infectious disease physician with Wilmington Health, also the chief epidemiologist at NHRMC. We've checked in with him throughout this entire pandemic, from just the initial weeks after we first saw cases, through masking policy changes, through the spike in the winter. And now as we enter this new chapter of vaccination and where it's heading to next, we thought it was a good time to do another check-in to answer our questions, but also yours as well if you're watching on the live stream in Facebook. If you want to post a question, I'll keep an eye on it and pass it along. But just to start us off real quick, Dr. Kamitsuka, before we even jump into all of our questions surrounding the different vaccine types and doses and questions on that, let's take a moment just to check in where we are in terms of locally on cases. I know nationally things have been starting to go on an upward trend again, both with cases and hospitalization. So let's start the conversation there and see where are we at in the Wilmington region.
Sure. Currently we're steady locally, but we're anxiously following that trend just because of the numbers that are coming out of states like Michigan and Wisconsin, where there's been a real worrisome surge in cases. I think what's become apparent is that the UK variant, the so-called B.1.1.7 variant, has become predominant over a very short period of time, as predicted here in the United States, just as it did in the UK. And this variant is both more contagious, but the data looks like it's also more causes more morbidity and mortality as well. So it's a more dangerous virus, and all of the vaccines do still protect against it, however, and which is why one of the major messages to really emphasize now is the vital importance of everybody getting vaccinated as soon as possible. But right now, locally, we're steady. We have maybe about 15 patients in the hospital now. In early January, we were up to like 93 patients in the hospital. So we're down, thank goodness. But we need to keep it down because it's still very much with us in our community as well as elsewhere.
And I do want to touch on those variants in a little bit too, and what you think impact that they might have as we move forward. But let's start with the vaccines and the different ones that are being administered locally, the 3 different ones. What kinds of questions are you hearing most from patients? Is it about which type and how they compare, or is it about potential side effects, or all of that?
Yeah, all of that. I probably answer about 50 vaccine questions every day. And the first thing to emphasize is just how fortunate we are that we have 3 vaccines, all of which appear to work extremely well. The first 2 vaccines, the Pfizer and the Moderna, those are mRNA vaccines. This is the first time in history that we've rolled out mRNA vaccine technology. It's not a new technology. It's been, people have been working on it for the past 10, 15 years, but this is the first vaccine that has been used in a widespread fashion utilizing this technology. And the really exciting news is that it's extraordinarily effective. So with the Pfizer vaccine, 2 weeks, Pfizer or the Moderna, 2 weeks after the second shot, you're virtually 95% protected against getting COVID infection, and then virtually 100% protected against being very sick from COVID or dying from COVID. And that's just an extraordinarily reassuring thing to know, that you're not going to COVID. And then the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which most recently came out, now that is unlike the other two, a one-shot vaccine. And it also appears to be 100% protective against dying from COVID. The effectiveness in terms of protecting against getting COVID is maybe, say, 85%, maybe a little less than 95%. But really the metric that really should matter the most is, are you going to get real sick from COVID or die from COVID? And the Johnson & Johnson vaccine appears equally effective in terms of preventing that with just one shot as opposed to 2 shots for the others. So, it's just remarkable how effective it is. The other thing to emphasize is just how safe these vaccines are. And these vaccines are probably more studied now than any other vaccine that's ever been released in history. And we've got a lot of doses out now, probably 130, 150 million doses, and 0 worrisome safety concerns. Yes, you may get some side effects, and we can talk about what side effects might happen, but no safety signals in terms of any dangerous things happening as a result of vaccination. And that's extraordinary, to have not only probably one of the most effective vaccines, but also one of the safest vaccines coming out in one set of products for something as deadly as COVID-19.
We should point out, didn't the CDC this week release its own results from its study that backed up what the clinical studies had shown from the pharmaceutical companies?
Yes, they did. And also the country of Israel conducted a real world study of the Pfizer vaccine and basically found that their results, I think they had 850,000 people vaccinated in that study, and the results were basically identical to the results from the phase 3 studies. So these vaccines are not only proving themselves to be both very effective and very safe in the testing phase by the companies, but also in the real world, which is really what we'd like to know. And all that data is starting to come out now. Johnson & Johnson did their study not only in the Western world, but also in South Africa. They had a study there. And one of the variants that we're concerned about is the South African variant. And some of the other vaccines, the British AstraZeneca vaccine, really did not perform very well in South Africa. But the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which we now have, if it was 85% protective against getting COVID in the United States, it was 82% in South Africa, even though the predominant strain was the more worrisome South African strain. So I think we can be quite reassured about the effectiveness of these vaccines, even in the face of the variants. But that does raise another issue, is the need to get vaccinated quickly, as soon as we possibly can, because we're in sort of a race with these variants. Variants occur if a lot of people still keep getting COVID. And in the process of getting COVID, the vaccine has the opportunity to keep multiplying, replicating. That's when the mutations occur, which may then lead to the variants. So if we vaccinate the population as quickly as possible, we bring down the number of new cases of COVID and rob the virus of the opportunity to mutate. And that's our best defense against the variants causing trouble for us as the months go on.
What questions do you hear most from patients who are skeptical about getting the vaccine? What comes up most often for?
Yeah. So a series of questions. One is, they're concerned about how fast the vaccine came out. And what I usually do describe to them is, well, let's say that you need to check off 20 boxes, 20 items that you have to do to be able to present a vaccine to the FDA for approval. But let's say you have a small budget and a disease that doesn't happen so frequently as we've seen with COVID-19 this past year. Then it's going to take you a long time to check all the boxes to get all the tasks completed. But let's say instead that you have an enormous budget. The government gives you a lot of money to study this. So you have a whole army of people who are ready to test, and a disease that's occurring so rapidly that it's not at all hard to find cases. And then if the study design is to give placebo to 20,000 people and the vaccine to 20,000, and then see who gets COVID, you can see that if you have a lot of people enrolled very quickly in a situation where the disease is very common, you'd be able to answer that question very quickly and check all of the boxes in a short period of time. Exactly what happened. There were no shortcuts whatsoever taken in the production of these vaccines. It's just that there was so much COVID and the studies were well funded to be able to get them done quickly that we were able to get an answer very quickly. Now, when the vaccines were first released, there was more limited data with regard to safety, but now that's not the case. We've got tons of data with regard to safety. 150 million doses given, and very reassuringly zero, serious adverse events that would raise a signal for this. Now, it's not to say that there haven't been some, serious reactions to some of the vaccine, but they're very uncommon. Let's take, for example, a severe allergic reaction to the Pfizer vaccine, for example. That's estimated to occur between 2 to 4 per million doses, okay? Let's put that into context. So let's say that you have a strep throat and you're not allergic to penicillin, and I, as a physician, give you some penicillin to take for your strep throat. You wouldn't think twice about taking the penicillin. But the reality is that you are 50 times more likely to have a severe allergic reaction to the penicillin I would give you than to the Pfizer vaccine. And so there really is the safety is really incredible, and we really need to understand that we're in a very different place now than where we were, for example, in December when the vaccine first came out. We know a lot more. We have a lot more experience, and now you may have some side effects, and we may discuss this further later, but what the side effects represent, and what are the side effects? When I got my vaccine, I had some soreness in the arm. That's all I really had the first time, maybe less soreness the second time. Other people may get fever. My wife just really sort of felt lousy and sort of had to go to bed for a day. So you can get that. You can get a headache. Some people develop sort of a reaction in the tissue of the arm where the vaccine went in. But what I always tell people is when I got the vaccine, I was looking forward to having some side effects, because what the side effects reflect is your immune system actually responding to the vaccine. And I wanted to know that I was responding to the shot, okay? And, my brother, he's a pianist in New York City. He got vaccinated. And the day after, he texted me sort of in a panic saying, I got this vaccine. I don't feel anything. And so he was worried that he got a dud vaccine, but I reassured him no, I'm sure you got the right stuff. So some people have no reaction at all. Other people have more significant but short-lived reactions to the vaccine. And that just has to do with how your body is responding, doing what it's supposed to be doing in terms of responding to the vaccine.
Do we know if there's anything people can do to mitigate some of those potential side effects? I've heard, I don't know if these are legitimate medical advice or just, anecdotal things, but heard things like making sure you're hydrated and drink lots of fluid. And I have heard, and whether or not this is the proper guidance from the CDC, but whether or not people should be taking pain medications as well once they start feeling the effects. What's the guidance that you tell your patients?
Yeah, so Tylenol taken after the vaccine. We don't recommend taking anything like Tylenol or Advil before you get the shot, but after the shot, if needed, you can certainly take it. Tylenol in particular, the Advil or Aleve, the ibuprofen or naproxen, they're anti-inflammatory medications, unlike Tylenol. And what you don't want to do is to really blunt too much your body's inflammatory reaction to the vaccine, because that's part of how it's working to sort of incite your immune response. But if you need to, if you're really aching, have muscle aches and so forth, if you take an Advil or two, it's not going to materially affect your response to the vaccine in all likelihood. So afterwards, to take something like that would be fine. If you don't need it, don't take it.
So let's talk a little bit about what happens then after you're fully vaccinated. And just a reminder, if you do have questions, I'll pass them along. You can just add them to the comment feed on the live stream. So you receive your 2 doses with the Pfizer or Moderna version, or 1 dose with the Johnson & Johnson, and then you have your 2-week window afterwards. So after you are considered fully vaccinated, what do we know right now in terms of whether you can still transmit the virus, even if you won't get sick from it?
Yeah, so that data is starting to come in, and basically, for example, in the study from Israel, which looked at the Pfizer vaccine, the vaccine and what they looked at is 1 week after the second dose. We usually like to think in terms of 2 weeks after the second dose when you have the full immunity. But in this study, they looked 1 week after the second dose. And what they found was that with the vaccine, you were well over 90% protected against getting infection at all, and meaning asymptomatic or symptomatic infection. What that means is that your chance of getting an infection which potentially contagious is only say less than 1 in 10. But that is also why we recommend, even after you've been vaccinated, if you're going out in public, you wear a mask and still socially distance, because there's still a chance that you can even asymptomatically be infected with a new COVID infection and transmit it to others. So now the thing that you personally would be reassured with, though, is that you're highly unlikely to get significantly ill with the second COVID infection, and you're not going to die from the COVID infection. But transmission can occur even for people with no symptoms at all. And that's why we still recommend masking and distancing, even if you've had the vaccine.
So that's what life might look like in public. What does life look then, say, in the workplace or in the office, assuming everyone is fully vaccinated?
Yeah, I guess first I want to talk about what it looks like in family and friend settings. And I'm happy to report that a month ago, for the first time in a year, My wife and I went to another couple's house for dinner. None of us wore masks, as all of us were vaccinated. And we had a wonderful evening for the first time in a year to be able to just sort of freely interact like we have been accustomed to doing, in prior times. It was really a liberating experience. What a relief. What a joy to be able to do that. And the current CDC guidance is if you're going to a household and everybody's vaccinated, no mask, no distancing. You can behave like normal. It's only when you've got multiple groups coming together where caution is still advised. But for grandparents who haven't seen their grandchildren for a long period of time, if the more people who are vaccinated, you can start actually visiting and spending time without having to be so careful about distancing. So that's really the other positive part about getting vaccinated. It opens up these options to you much more. The only thing is if you're out in public, because of still the possibility of being able to contract infection, which may not make you real sick, but still you could transmit it, that's where the masking and distancing still applies.
And so when you're referring to the latest update to the CDC guidance, did they also provide updated guidance to then also for businesses or offices, not in a public, retail forward-facing setting, but in offices like where many of our readers work out of?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to you have to know your fellow employees to some extent yet, just because the prevalence of the infection is high. In my office, for example, we still mask, even though all of us have been vaccinated, just because we have patients coming, in and out. Everybody's masked, patients and others, but we still want to provide that margin of safety. If you're in a very closed unit with coworkers, all of whom have been vaccinated and all of whom you trust to follow the rules in terms of wearing their masks and distancing in public, then yeah, you could take your mask off because the risk there should be low. So it really depends on your assessment of the care and behavior of your coworkers, and also making sure other people who are outside that circle aren't coming in and out, which would be the case, for example, in my office.
So the state, besides also announcing a date when eligibility for vaccination would open up to basically any adults over the age of 16 in North Carolina who wants to receive a vaccine, they also announced another round of loosening some of the restrictions that have been in place for certain businesses, particularly with bars and restaurants and capacity limits on that end. Just curious, what do you think about the state's current level of restrictions? Do you think it is still too soon, or is it in line with what the statistics are showing?
No, it's soon. It's too soon. And one of the things it's important to emphasize is just because it's legal doesn't mean it's smart. Okay. And it's sort of like we're right now with a campfire that's still with, some burning embers. It takes very little to light the fire up again. And the thing is, we're so close. We're so close. We're just about to launch vaccination for anybody who wants it. And all we got to do is to hang on 2 or 3 months more until we're able to get to a position where we got the majority of people vaccinated, so we have herd immunity. But until we get there, we can have surges, especially with variants that are more contagious, like the UK variant. So there's no way I'm going to be going into a bar. There's no way I'm, it's just not prudent. But as soon as we get to a stage where it is more prudent, I guess I'll be visiting a bar quite often to make up for it. But right now we really have to emphasize safety, and I'm particularly alarmed with states like Texas, who drop mask mandates. That's just not a smart thing to do, given the levels of COVID in the environment.
Dr. Kamitsuka, before we run out of time, I did want to bring up one more topic, particularly since you just mentioned the herd immunity goal. And that is the discussion around vaccines for children and youth. I guess my first question would be, when we say herd immunity, can you even get to herd immunity if such a large segment of the population, which is children and youth, those under 16, of which there has not been a vaccine yet developed for, but those are under study right now. But basically, and even though children have not been shown to be at risk, along with as high risk as other age population groups, but is herd immunity even achievable if this large segment of the population is not vaccinated?
Yeah, no, we're going to need to get kids vaccinated if we're going to reach herd immunity. Just this past week, Pfizer released some data on kids down to age 12. And I think it's not going to be that much longer where we're going to be able to give these vaccines to children. Even now, the Pfizer vaccine is approved down to age of 16. And I think we need to start vaccinating teenagers 16 and up as soon as possible. I'm of the mind that we need to get to vaccinating anybody and everybody who wants it as soon as possible, without any barriers to getting the shot, because we really need to get to herd immunity as soon as possible, including right now the kids 16 and up with the Pfizer vaccine, and then subsequently extending down to younger children. So that would be ultimately necessary for us to reach herd immunity. We can get pretty close, even without. We can get up to maybe the 75% level if all adults got it. I suspect for this virus, we'll need to be somewhere in the 85% to get true herd immunity. But we're marching toward that goal. But really the key thing is, if anybody is hesitant to get the vaccine, we want to talk with them to really reassure them, just both in terms of the data and also answer whatever questions they have that is a concern. Because for those of us who look at the data very carefully, there really is no reason to wait, and every reason to benefit from the vaccines sooner rather than later.
And I think it's fair to say the issue of vaccines for children, vaccines that are already established can be controversial and a hard sell amongst families. So a vaccine that is new and just now starting to be tested on children for a disease and virus that has had overall lower risk for children, I think it's pretty safe to assume this is going to be much more of a tougher sell, and a lot more questions and perhaps more reluctance from parents who, even if they were fine vaccinating themselves, may be more hesitant to vaccinate their children. So I say that to lead into what is the latest that, and even knowing that we're still very early in those clinical trials, has there been enough data or information coming out about potential side effects, and what kinds of things should families kind of be keeping an eye on as this is going forward? Since it does seem like the timeline for developing a vaccine for children has moved up. So possibly, are we looking at potentially end of this year or still into next year?
No, I suspect at least the Pfizer seems to have had the jump on this. I would hope that we'd have something for kids by the fall, and then Moderna shortly thereafter, and Johnson & Johnson shortly after that. So I'm hoping, and I think there's going to be a push to get that done as early as possible, but perhaps the fall for Pfizer. But as you point out, kids have been much less implicated so far, unlike infections like flu. in the as transmitters of this virus. Data from schools, for example, suggests that really it's the teachers, the adults, who are the major spreaders, not the kids. But that becomes less and less true the older the kids are, particularly if you get into high school, where kids can be more of a transmitter. But even now, we can start vaccinating 16 and up, which is a big chunk of high school. And you don't have to vaccinate all the kids to get to herd immunity. You only a portion of the pediatric population to still be able to reach herd immunity.
All right, Dr. Kamitsuka, thanks very much for joining us today. As always, like I mentioned earlier, we appreciate you spending this time to check in and update us on what the latest research is and what's being shown. You know, I know we were talking before we came on that there's a lot of chapters to this story. It's not the most fun story or book we've ever read, obviously, but it's good to know that we have some folks like you in the community along the way that can help us decipher some of these. So I'm sure we'll be checking in again at the next chapter. We don't know what it's going to say or be written from here to then, but we'll be sure to make sure to follow up with you then. And thanks to everybody who tuned in. And if you have future questions or suggestions for future biz talks, feel free to email us at newsroom@wilmingtonbiz.com and check out our previous podcasts and episodes on wilmingtonbiztalk.com. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next week.
Okay. Bye-bye.